Welcome back, Omnibuds. The Superhero Registration Act is about to split the Marvel Universe down the center. I'm talking about Marvel's Civil War, written by Mark Millar and drawn by Steve McNiven. Whose side are you on, Captain America or Iron Man? Grab your cup of coffee and let's check out this book. All right, here is Civil War by Mark Millar, and Steve McNiven. This is the oversized hardcover version of this. This is released in a lot of different ways. There's a trade paperback. There's a standard size hardcover. There's a standard size hardcover box set with, I think, most of the tie-ins. Good luck finding that. There's an oversized hardcover with just the story, and then there's the oversized hardcover with a ton of extras. I think they call it Marvel Spotlight, Civil War, and the script book. There's a lot of interviews with Mark Millar, Steve McNiven, and other creators. But this is how I have it. I will say that at a minimum, you should pick up the trade paperback of The Road to Civil War. This is going to be imperative to you understanding the story here. It includes the Illuminati one-shot. So Brian Michael Bendis introduces this concept of the Illuminati, and it's, specific heroes from specific groups who have for years been kind of meeting secretly and making big decisions for the Marvel world. It also includes Spider-Man issues 529 through 531, and those are absolute musts. In fact, if they make an omnibus of this, it almost has to start with this trade paperback. It also includes some issues of Fantastic Four, and those are all by J. Michael Straczynski. But 100% start with this. And then I would say, if you want to fully enjoy this book, read with it at least The Amazing Spider-Man, but you could also add in Iron Man Civil War, and I think the Fantastic Four book as well. But let's take the dust jacket off this thing because we are not animals, and we'll get into it. All right, here we have it. Beautiful kind of faux leather, white. This has been beaten up. I've read this many times, but gorgeous book there. Let's have a look. I'm going to gush about Steve McNiven's art throughout this quite a bit. We get some Iron Spider, which is first seen in a couple issues prior to Iron Man. Gives that to Spider-Man, who is on Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers team. But let's get into it. And one thing to note, we won't see a lot of the X-Men team here. The X-Men team, maybe 6, 7, 8 months ago went through the events of House of M. And they are largely under guard at Xavier's mansion by Sentinels. And so they, I would say, mostly stay out of this. Another thing that I'm going to gush about every single time I get the opportunity is the variant covers by Michael Turner are near perfection. I love them. So we start off with the Young Avengers. They're in Stamford, Connecticut, and they are batting or hitting above their pay grade, let's say. They're going after some villains, and they're trying to record it to get views. They run into some villains that are on the run. A lot of them have escaped from the launch of the New Avengers and the breakout at the Raft. But like I said, they're hitting above their pay grade, and they go after some villains that they should not have. They were not prepared for. And one of them is Nitro. And Nitro's ability to kind of explode like a bomb and where this happens is absolutely devastating. I forget the number. We'll come up to it later, or maybe I'll throw it up here. But, this explosion in Stamford, Connecticut, in a neighborhood near a school, I think it kills like 800 people. And that is the straw that breaks the camel's back. If you read the Road to book, Tony Stark talks to Peter a lot about, Capitol Hill's talking more and more about this Superhero Registration Act, and could that become reality? And it wasn't all because of Stanford. There were some things that led up to it. The Avengers disassembling. The attack on the mansion was crazy. In the events of Mark Millar's Wolverine, Enemy of the State, Wolverine, who is brainwashed by the Hand, threatens to kill the president of the United States. Then you've got Nick Fury's Secret War, where he goes against the United States' desires and attacks and tries to overthrow Latveria. Then you get the Raft, the breakout at the Raft prison, where I think 40 to 50 supervillains escape despite significant superhero presence. So all those things, then the explosion in Stamford, Connecticut, lead to the United States wanting to create this Superhuman Registration Act. So, the first issue is kind of introducing that concept. We get really similar crossover from the movie. Obviously, this influenced the movie quite a bit, but this woman's son died in Stanford, and she spits on Tony, and that really influences Tony's decision here. We get something terrible happens to Johnny Storm, and just the superheroes are in an upheaval. So they meet at the Baxter Building, and they're talking it over. And Iron Man kind of comes out and says, "This is, the way things are going to go. I'm going to back the registration." And Captain America is adamantly against it. He thinks it goes against civil liberties. And a lot of the things, if you've watched the movie, a lot of his reasoning is drawn straight from this book. We've got Maria Hill, acting director of S.H.I.E.L.D., because Fury is gone. He's gone for a while. But then we get into the second issue, and we're in the midst of things here. So Captain America and Iron Man have kind of chosen their sides. And the Fantastic Four, or at least Reed Richards, is with Tony Stark as a pro-registration. But that's not true of all of the Fantastic Four, right? This Marvel's first family, they don't all see eye to eye. But we very quickly have S.H.I.E.L.D. hunting down heroes who have chosen not to register. And Captain America and his new Avengers have gone underground. Not to spoil anything, I know this is like 15, 16 years old, so I'll try to skip over, but Spider-Man sides with Iron Man in this and makes a pretty big decision that's going to affect him for years to come. So as we get into issue 3 here, and like I said, I was going to try to find, these Michael Turner covers are just beautiful. So as we get into issue 3, the pro-registration and anti-registration groups are trying to recruit allies, essentially. And Reed goes after the Black Panther in Wakanda, who says, "I'm largely going to stay out of this." Tony goes after the X-Men, and, there's hints at a past relationship with Emma Stone here, who denies, right? She wants to, the Avengers are going to stay out of it. But then we go back to the new Avengers, who are in hiding, right? Because they are anti-registration. This law, or this bill is now a law. So they're playing dress up here and meeting out in the at cafes and such, planning. There's a big thing that happens. So the kind of first big fight happens, and I will say, without spoiling things, Thor comes back. And if you're reading this at the time they came out, this is huge, because Thor has been gone since, I want to say, 2022 or 2001 or 2002, from the events of Ragnarok. And so he's been gone. And so when you're reading this and Thor comes back, and it's kind of this holy shit moment, he's back, and this is going to change the tides, right? But it turns out it's not the Thor that we know. Another Michael Turner cover. I told you I was going to gush about the perfect, absolute perfection right there. Gone before his time. But this is not the Thor we know. This is not the real Thor. This was a clone made by Hank Pym and Reed and Tony, some pretty smart people. But that Thor clone makes a huge mistake, and a superhero that everyone loves dies, and it really makes this thing real. So I'll try to skip that so we don't see it, because I don't want to give everything away here. But it's now real, right? Someone has died amongst friends. So as we continue on, I think we're into issue 4 here. The heroes are clashing. We learn about this negative zone prison that Reed is creating to put heroes and villains who do not register. This is kind of a hint at Spider-Man's second decision that he makes in this book that is super emotional for him. Turns his back on kind of a father figure in this story, makes a decision that is going to affect him for years to come. So at this point, people on both sides are really questioning their decision, right? We had a death. We've got, people leaving. We're fighting in the streets. We're recruiting villains now to fight. Tony has kind of announced his plan at a superhero team in every state, which he calls the Initiative. And some of these heroes might be old villains that have, agreed to fight for the good guys if they get out of prison. This is a really cool moment here. I won't give you the background on it, but Punisher, who obviously looks up to Captain America, shows up to join the anti-registration team. But Punisher makes a decision that is very Frank Castle, and Captain America doesn't love it, and so they go at it. This is just infighting through and throughout. So Spidey makes his decision, and we come to the last issue of this. And let's see if we can get another Michael Turner cover. I think they're back here. Yeah, there it is. Man, so good. So we get the final battle, anti-registration versus pro-registration. And Cap's team is when I love this moment here. So Spider-Man is fighting, some former friends, some villains, and you just kind of see this artwork here of him taking everyone down. And Reed Richards, the smartest man in the universe, says that's amazing, and Spider-Man says no, it's spectacular. Love it. Kind of on the nose, but I absolutely love it. So we get the the results of this are that Captain America's team is going to have the upper hand, and they end up winning. Captain America defeats Iron Man in this, but ends up taking his mask off and telling police officers to arrest him because he sees the destruction around him. He sees the faces on the population of New York where they're battling, and decides this is not what it's all about. Even though I believe my decision is the right one, not everyone else believes that. And so he turns himself in this act of sacrifice, and that's going to drive stories again for Captain America. So we get a new Mighty Avengers team. We get the Sentry, Wonder Man, Captain Marvel, Iron Man leading the team. We get hints more at this Initiative, a superhero team in every state. Here's your Texas team. I have no idea who any of those people are. But the new Avengers kind of continue on. Not everyone is captured. And the Mighty Avengers are now the face of this new law. But as I said, some of the decisions that Spider-Man makes influence him and going forward. So going forward, you have to read Amazing Spider-Man by J. Michael Straczynski, the Back in Black storyline. You have to continue reading Ed Brubaker's Captain America to find out what happens with him. And then, like I said, the New Avengers and the Mighty Avengers kind of split. We also see some reconciliation with the Fantastic Four, but that's the story. It's only 7 issues long, and I'll get into it in kind of in my recap, but I think this is a story that really needs some more context. If you just read these 7, you're going to be thinking, man, people didn't act the right way. The voices aren't all there, but the extras in this book is really cool. You get an interview with Steve McNiven. I think there's an interview with Mark Millar. We get some Brian Michael Bendis. Really cool extras that is actually about half of this book. So we probably won't get all of this in an omnibus. But yeah, let's go and recap this story. Welcome back. So off the top, I really enjoy Civil War, the story. It's not without its faults, though. And a lot of the critics will say that a lot of these characters acted um, widely different than they feel like they normally would. And I agree to a point, but I also think that most of these characters are in a position that they've never been in before, or asking questions about their reality that they've never had to before. But I do agree that Mark Millar does not get the voices of every character correct. He doesn't get Iron Man and Captain America perfect. In fact, I don't think he should ever write Captain America. The premise of this story, the Superhuman Registration Act, the split, the battle, I get all of that. It's really cool stuff. And from a 35,000 foot view, it's executed pretty well. The art by Steve McNiven is flawless. It's amazing. I think Steve McNiven's one of the best out there, and this was some of his best work. But yeah, Mark Millar doesn't get the voices of everyone absolutely correct. And not every writer does, especially when you're bringing all of these heroes together. But I also think that this is a book that suffers from some context. If you read just the first, I think it's 7 issues of the main story, you miss quite a bit. Generally, in events, I prefer just the book and leave the tie-ins out. There are rare circumstances where I think the tie-ins are necessary. Think like War of the Realms. You need those Thor issues in there. Secret Invasion, the New Avengers and Mighty Avengers stories are pretty important to understand kind of how everything happened. But generally, I like to read just the event. And that's why for event books, I generally go with the oversized hardcover, the deluxe edition, and I forego the omnibus. But Civil War is a story that needs some of that context. And an omnibus for Civil War has been debated amongst our community for years. How would they do it? Would it be 2 books? Would it be 3? I think it would probably be 3, maybe like a main book with the primary tie-ins, and then upwards of 2 what's the word? Companion omnibuses. Sorry, it's early omnibus. So a main book and 2 companion omnibuses with all those tie-ins. But not all of the tie-ins matter. I think it's really important, like I said, to read that road to Civil War. Those Spider-Man issues are, and the Illuminati issue is very important to kind of the stepping stones for what's about to happen in that first issue. I also think that the Spider-Man issues throughout are incredibly important. I would also argue that the Fantastic Four issues are important. The heart of this story is Spider-Man's decision. Well, he makes 2 decisions in this story, and that's kind of the heart of this story. The other heartbeat of this story is Reed and Sue and the Civil War that happens within their family. I think the New Avengers stories are okay. The Captain America stuff is largely still driving the Ed Brubaker story and are not terribly necessary. But then the Iron Man stuff is pretty important to understand what's going on in Tony's head. What are his plans? What are his reservations? Because throughout this book, he's not 100% sold in his decision. As an event book, I think this is a really fun story. It does something that us fans, complain about quite a bit. These big stories don't have any lasting impact. Civil War had lasting impact. You think about what happens to Captain America, what happens to Spider-Man, the split of the Avengers. Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers split down the middle. The New Avengers continue on with their anti-registration and their now illegal activity. And Iron Man starts the Mighty Avengers and the Initiative. So this story had lasting impact despite its faults. largely, I think, driven by Mark Millar. I think Brian Michael Bendis should have written this, and I'll die on that hill. Bendis was the architect of everything happening in Marvel at that time. So it was always weird to me that they gave that book to someone else to write. I still love this story. Like I said, despite its faults, I'm going to map a omnibus for this because I feel pretty strongly on what needs to be in the middle of these issues. And it's not everything. And it's not all the things that you would think should be in there. So I'll record that and put that up soon. But let me know down in the comments what you thought of Civil War, what you think an omnibus would look like, and would you buy it? Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks, Omnibuds.